The ache had become a part of her, as fundamental as a bone or a vital organ. Alara had housed it in the hollow of her chest for 2 years, for months and 11 days. It was a dull, constant throb, a phantom limb of a love she could never claim, and its name was Clara. Every morning, she woke with it, and every night, she tried to sleep despite it. It was the silent, ever-present guest at their dinner table, the third person on their sofa during movie nights, the ghost in the machine of their friendship. Being Clara's best friend was a special kind of torment, a beautiful, slow-motion self-destruction. It meant being the first person she called after a fight with Mark, her boyfriend of 3 years. It meant being the keeper of her secrets, the shoulder for her tears, the steadfast lighthouse to her storm-tossed ship. For Alara, it meant sitting on her hands to keep from reaching out, biting her tongue to keep from saying "leave him," and plastering on a supportive smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Each word of comfort she offered was a small betrayal of her own heart, a little white lie that chipped away at her soul. This evening was no different. They were curled on opposite ends of their worn velvet sofa, a bowl of half-eaten popcorn between them. The television murmured in the background, forgotten. Clara's voice was a low, wistful thread in the dim light of the living room, weaving another tapestry of her dissatisfaction. "He just doesn't see me," Clara said, pulling a cushion into her lap and hugging it tight. Her brow was furrowed, her beautiful face clouded with a familiar frustration. "We were at dinner with his parents, and he told that story again. The one about how we met. Only he told it wrong. He said I was wearing a yellow dress. It was blue, Alara. A cornflower blue sundress. How can he not remember that?" A knife, small and sharp, twisted in Alara's ribs. She remembered the dress. Of course she did. She had helped Clara pick it out. She remembered the way the color brought out the gold flecks in Clara's hazel eyes, the way the fabric had swirled around her knees when she spun in front of the mirror, laughing. Alara remembered everything. "Maybe he was just nervous," Alara offered, the practiced words tasting like ash in her mouth. "You know how he gets around his father." Clara sighed, a sound heavy with more than just this one forgotten detail. "It's not just that. It's everything. It feels like we're performing. Like we're playing the roles of the perfect couple for an audience that isn't there. When we're alone, it's quiet. But it's not a comfortable quiet. It's an empty quiet. Does that make any sense?" It made a terrifying amount of sense. Alara's entire being screamed with the things she wanted to say. "My quiet with you is never empty. It's full of all the words I can't speak. It's full of the sound of my own heart beating your name like a drum." Instead, she just nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the way the lamplight caught the soft curve of Clara's cheek. "I think I understand." Clara shifted, turning to face her more fully. The intensity in her eyes made Alara's breath catch. "Do you? Do you really? Because sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. I have this wonderful, handsome, successful boyfriend who loves me, and all I feel is this." She gestured vaguely at the space between them, at the air thick with unspoken things. "This giant, gaping hole. Something is missing, Elle. And I don't know what it is." Alara's own gaping hole, the one in her chest, ached in sympathy. "I'm what's missing," she thought, the audacity of it a wild, forbidden thrill. "The thing you're looking for is sitting right here, dying a little more every time you talk about him." But she couldn't say that. She would never say that. Because the fragile architecture of their friendship was built on the foundation of her silence. To speak would be to bring the whole beautiful, agonizing structure crashing down around them. And losing Clara entirely was a prospect more terrifying than this daily, quiet suffering. So she held her peace, offered a weak smile, and felt like a ghost in her own life, watching the person she loved search for a happiness Alara was desperate to give her. The shift came on a Tuesday, a day of relentless, weeping rain that blurred the city into a watercolor of gray and gloom. Alara was curled under a blanket, trying to lose herself in a book, when the front door crashed open. Clara stumbled in, soaked to the bone, her mascara running in black rivulets down her cheeks, her face a mask of pure devastation. She wasn't carrying her keys or her purse. She was just there. Broken. "Clara." Elara was on her feet in an instant, the book forgotten on the floor. Clara looked at her, her eyes wide and lost, and a sound escaped her throat, a raw, wounded sob that shattered the quiet of the apartment. She collapsed into Elara's arms, her body trembling violently. Elara's own pain was momentarily eclipsed by a fierce, protective instinct. She wrapped her arms around Clara's shaking frame, holding her tight, murmuring soft, nonsensical words of comfort. "It's over," Clara choked out, her face buried in the crook of Elara's neck. It's over. For good this time." Elara's heart did a strange, complicated lurch. There was a flare of triumphant, terrible hope, immediately extinguished by a wave of guilt. She pushed it down, focusing only on the woman falling apart in her arms. She guided Clara to the sofa, wrapped her in the blanket she'd been using, and went to make tea, her hands moving on autopilot. When she returned, Clara was staring blankly at the rain-streaked window. She took the mug Elara offered, her fingers brushing against Elara's for a fraction of a second too long. A familiar jolt, a tiny spark of electricity, shot up Elara's arm. It was a sensation she'd felt 1,000 times, one she always tried to ignore. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the ticking clock and the drumming of rain against the glass. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice thick and raspy. "He said I was impossible to please. That I was always searching for something he couldn't give me." She turned her gaze from the window to Elara, and her eyes were so clear, so vulnerable, it was like looking into an open wound. He was right. Later that night, long after the tears had dried and exhaustion had settled in, they were preparing for bed in their separate rooms. Elara was just turning off her lamp when a soft knock came at her door. It creaked open, and Clara stood there, a small, uncertain silhouette in the hallway light. She was clutching her pillow to her chest like a shield. "Elle," she whispered. I know this is stupid, but can I stay in here tonight? I don't want to be alone." The world tilted on its axis. Every nerve ending in Elara's body went on high alert. This was new territory, a line they had never crossed. Her bed, her space, had always been a sanctuary, the one place she could let her guard down and ache for Clara in peace. To have her here, in it, it was both a dream and a nightmare. "Of course," Elara heard herself say, her voice miraculously steady. She moved over, making space, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Clara slipped under the covers, her movements hesitant. The bed suddenly felt both enormous and impossibly small. She lay on her side, facing Elara, the pillow still clutched between them. The air was charged, thick with the scent of Clara's rain-damp hair and something else, something indefinable and new. "Thank you," Clara breathed into the darkness. "Always," Elara whispered back, and the word felt heavier, truer, than it ever had before. She lay perfectly still, listening to the sound of Clara's breathing, terrified that any movement might shatter the fragile, sacred truce of the moment. It was the beginning of something, she knew. And it terrified her. The days that followed the breakup were strange and suspended, like the moment of stillness before a storm breaks. Clara moved through their apartment like a phantom, her usual vibrancy muted. Mark was a non-entity, his things collected by a friend while Clara was out with Elara. He was erased from their physical space, but his ghost lingered in the conversations that now bloomed in the late-night quiet. These talks became a ritual. They'd end up on the sofa, mugs of herbal tea growing cold in their hands, the city lights twinkling below their window. Clara, free from the obligation of defending her relationship, began to dissect it with a raw, searching honesty. "I think I was performing heterosexuality," she said one night, the words startling even to her. She looked at Elara, her eyes wide with the dawning of a revelation. That's what it felt like. A role. The loving girlfriend. I knew all the lines. I knew the blocking. But I never felt authentic. I felt like I was watching myself from a distance, applauding at all the right moments. Elara's heart stuttered. This was dangerous ground. "What do you mean, a role?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "Like, it was what I was supposed to want," Clara explained, her hands moving as she tried to shape the thought. A good man, a nice apartment, the promise of a future. It's the story we're all told, right? But what if it's not my story? What if I've been trying to fit into a narrative that was never written for me? She looked down at her hands, then back up at Alara, her gaze piercing. What does real love feel like, Elle? Not the movie version. The real thing. You're the wisest person I know. What does it feel like? The irony was a physical blow, knocking the air from Alara's lungs. She, the resident expert on a love she was forced to hide, was being asked to define it. It felt like her ribs were a cage and her heart was a wild animal, thrashing against them. It felt like holding your breath underwater, waiting for a sign that it's safe to surface. It felt like the constant, low-grade fever she ran whenever Clara was near. I think, Alara began, choosing her words with surgical precision. I think it feels like safety, like coming home. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the quiet moments. It's knowing someone sees all the messy, complicated parts of you and doesn't just tolerate them, but cherishes them. It's a quiet that isn't empty. It's full. She was echoing Clara's own words back to her, filling them with her own silent meaning. Clara's expression softened, a look of such profound understanding on her face that it made Alara's soul ache. A full quiet, she whispered, as if tasting the words. I like that. In those weeks, physical boundaries blurred with an unnerving, intoxicating slowness. It started small. A lingering hug at the door that lasted a few heartbeats longer than usual. Then, during their talks, Clara's hand would find Alara's, her fingers lacing through hers with an unconscious ease, as if they were meant to be there. Alara's skin would burn at the contact, a wildfire spreading from their joined hands through her entire body. One evening, while watching a movie, Clara, who was curled up at the other end of the couch, shivered. I'm so cold, she murmured. Without thinking, Alara unfolded the afghan draped over the back of the sofa and pulled it over both of them. In the process, she shifted closer. Their knees touched. Neither of them moved away. For the rest of the film, that small point of contact was the center of Alara's universe, a sun radiating a heat that had nothing to do with the wool blanket. She was acutely aware of the texture of Clara's jeans, the slight pressure of her leg against hers, the subtle shifts in her weight. Then came the hair. They were talking, and a strand of Clara's dark hair fell across her face. Before Alara could censor the impulse, her hand was moving. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing the silk of Clara's hair, tucking it behind her ear. Her knuckles grazed the impossible softness of Clara's cheek. Time stopped. Clara's breath hitched. Her eyes, which had been fixed on Alara's, widened almost imperceptibly. Alara's hand froze for a second, suspended in the space between them, before she pulled it back as if burned. Sorry, she mumbled, her face flushing hot. But Clara shook her head, a small, slow movement. Don't be, she whispered, and her voice was thick with an emotion Alara couldn't name. And then it happened. The moment that would replay in Alara's mind for days. Clara's gaze, soft and searching, dropped from Alara's eyes to her lips. It was a fleeting, fractional shift, lasting no more than a single heartbeat, but to Alara, it felt like an eternity. It was a question asked in a language older than words. The ground beneath Alara's feet, which had been tilting for weeks, now felt like it was crumbling away entirely. She saw it in Clara's eyes, the same terrifying cocktail of fear and hope that was churning in her own stomach. Something was coming. A wave was building just off the coast of their quiet little island, and she didn't know if they were about to be rescued or completely destroyed. After that moment, the charged glance at her lips, an invisible wall rose between them. It was built of fear and unspoken possibilities. Alara, terrified of the hope that had taken root in her chest, began to retreat. She made excuses to be out of the apartment. She'd stay late at the library, claiming she had work to do. She'd take the long way home from the grocery store. She kept her headphones on while cooking, creating a bubble of sound to ward off conversation. It was a cowardly act of self-preservation. Her heart, so long accustomed to the dull ache of longing, was not equipped for the sharp, terrifying pang of hope. Hope was more dangerous. Hope could be shattered. The distance did not go unnoticed. For a week, the space between them grew cold and wide, filled with a silence that was no longer comfortable or full, but strained and aching. The late-night talks ceased. The casual touches vanished. The air in their home grew heavy, brittle. The confrontation came on a Saturday night. Ilara had just returned from a deliberately long, solitary walk, hoping the cool night air would clear her head. She entered the apartment to find Clara standing in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of hurt and resolve. The television was off. The lamps were low. The stage was set. "We need to talk," Clara said, her voice quiet but firm, leaving no room for escape. Ilara's stomach plummeted. "Clara, I'm really tired." "No," Clara cut her off, taking a step forward. "No more of that. You've been avoiding me for a week. You flinch when I get close. You disappear for hours. You've been hiding from me, Ilara, and I want to know why." Her eyes searched Ilara's, pleading for an honesty that Ilara was terrified to give. "Did I do something? Did I misread something? Please, just talk to me." Ilara's defenses crumbled under the weight of Clara's raw vulnerability. All the excuses died on her tongue. She felt a wave of shame for her cowardice, for causing this hurt. She owed her the truth. Or at least, a part of it. "It's not you," Ilara said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's me. I'm confused." "Confused about what?" Clara pressed, stepping closer still. They were only a few feet apart now. Close enough for Ilara to see the anxious pulse beating in Clara's throat. And then, the conversation veered into the territory Ilara had dreaded and yearned for in equal measure. Clara was getting ready to go out with some old college friends, the first time she'd done so since the breakup. She was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing a simple, elegant black dress that left her back exposed. She was struggling with the zipper. "Can you?" she asked, her voice hesitant, turning her back to Ilara. Ilara's hands trembled as she stepped forward. The air crackled. Her fingers brushed against the warm, smooth skin of Clara's back as she took hold of the tiny, cold metal tab of the zipper. The contrast was electric. Time seemed to slow down as she drew it upward, inch by painful inch. Each click of the zipper teeth was a tick of a clock counting down to something momentous. She could feel the warmth radiating from Clara's skin, could smell the faint, clean scent of her vanilla lotion. Her world narrowed to this single, overwhelmingly intimate act. The zipper reached the top. Her fingers lingered for a heartbeat on the nape of Clara's neck, just below her hairline. She should have pulled away. She needed to pull away. But she didn't. Clara stood perfectly still for a moment, her shoulders tense. Then, she let out a slow, shaky breath. She didn't turn around. She just tilted her head slightly, her voice a low, throbbing whisper that seemed to vibrate through Ilara's very bones. "Do you want me?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and glittering and dangerous. It was not a question about desire in the abstract. It was specific. It was now. It was a key turning in a lock that Ilara had kept bolted for years. All the air rushed from her lungs, and for a terrifying second, she thought she might faint. The world went silent, all sound sucked into the vacuum created by those 4 simple words. This was it. The point of no return. The precipice she had been walking towards for 2 years, for months, and what felt like a lifetime. She could lie. She could laugh it off, pretend it was a joke, and retreat back into the safe, agonizing prison of her silence. Or she could jump. Her hand, still resting on the warm skin of Clara's neck, trembled. A single, traitorous tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. She could feel Clara's stillness, her waiting. She was holding her breath, too. Ilara's own voice, when it finally came, was a choked, broken thing, raw with years of unspoken truth. Yes, she breathed, the word a confession, a prayer, a surrender. It was the truest thing she had ever said. She took another shuddering breath, the words tumbling out now, unstoppable. "For years, Clara." Yes. Clara's shoulders sagged with what seemed like relief. She turned around slowly, her own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Her face was a canvas of shock, terror, and a fragile, dawning hope. She looked at Alara as if seeing her for the first time, as if the years of friendship were a veil that had just been lifted. I didn't know, Clara whispered, her voice full of wonder. I think a part of me knew. Deep down. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what it was. She reached out, her hand hovering in the space between them before she seemed to find her courage, her fingers gently touching Alara's cheek, wiping away the tear. The touch was a brand, a promise. Breaking up with Mark, it wasn't about him. Not really. It was about this feeling, this pull towards you. I've been so confused and so scared. I thought I was going crazy. I kept thinking about you. About your smile. About the way your hand felt when you tucked my hair behind my ear. Her gaze dropped to Alara's lips, no longer fleeting or uncertain, but deliberate and full of intent. I've been thinking about kissing you, she confessed, her voice dropping to a murmur. A lot. The confession hung between them, a fragile bridge built across a chasm of fear. Alara's heart, which had been hammering, suddenly felt calm, settled. The ache was still there, but it was transforming, morphing from the pain of longing into the sharp, exquisite pang of possibility. Can I? Alara whispered, the question both a plea and a final, necessary confirmation. She needed to hear it, to be sure this wasn't some fevered dream. Clara didn't speak. She just nodded, her eyes fluttering closed as she leaned in. The first touch of their lips was impossibly soft, a tentative question. It was hesitant, shy, freighted with the weight of years of unspoken feelings and the terrifying newness of the moment. It was the brush of a butterfly's wing, a whisper of skin on skin. For a second, that was all it was. A gentle, exploratory pressure. Then, something broke open inside Alara. The dam of her restraint, so carefully constructed, so diligently maintained, shattered into a million pieces. A sob of pure, unadulterated relief caught in her throat as she deepened the kiss. Her hand moved from Clara's neck to cup the back of her head, her fingers tangling in her soft hair. Clara responded in kind, a soft sound of surrender sighing from her lips. Her hands came up to frame Alara's face, her thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. The kiss was no longer tentative. It was a discovery. It was urgent and hungry, but not with aggression. It was a hunger for understanding, for closeness, for confirmation that this was real. It was years of silent conversations finally being spoken. It was messy and tear-salted and utterly, breathtakingly perfect. It tasted of vanilla and relief and the end of a very long, very lonely wait. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, foreheads resting against each other. Their chests rose and fell in unison, trying to reclaim the air that had been stolen from them. Alara's eyes were still closed, savoring the ghost of the kiss on her lips, the feeling of Clara's hands on her skin. Oh, Clara breathed, the word a puff of warm air against Alara's mouth. Wow. Yeah, Alara managed to say, her voice thick. She opened her eyes. Clara's were already open, gazing at her with an expression of such raw, unvarnished wonder that it made Alara's heart ache in a new and beautiful way. That felt, Clara started, then stopped, searching for the word. Right, Alara finished for her. It felt right. Clara nodded, a slow, emphatic movement. Yes, that's it. Right. A tremor of fear, a chilling aftershock, ran through Alara. The reality of what they had just done, of the line they had crossed, began to settle in. Their entire world had just been rewritten in the space of a single kiss. I'm terrified, Alara admitted, the words stark in the quiet room. It was the most vulnerable she had ever allowed herself to be. Clara's hands tightened on her face, her touch grounding. She didn't pull away. Me too, she whispered, her own voice trembling slightly. I'm completely and utterly terrified. I feel like I've just woken up from a very long dream, and I don't know any of the rules in this new world. They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, two terrified souls on the edge of a new beginning. The fear was real, a cold knot in Alara's stomach, but beneath it, a warm, steady current of relief was flowing. The secret was out. The truth was known. Whatever happened next, she was no longer alone in it. Then a look of sudden, startling clarity washed over Clara's face. It was as if 1,000 scattered puzzle pieces had just snapped into place. "Oh my God," she breathed, her eyes wide with revelation. "All this time, for all these years, I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you." Alara stared at her, her heart stilling. "Every complaint I had about Mark," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength with the certainty of her realization, "it was never really about him. It was about you. He didn't remember the color of my dress, but you would have. He didn't know how to comfort me, but you always did. The empty quiet I felt with him, it was only empty because it wasn't the full quiet I have with you. I was measuring him against you, Alara. I was measuring everyone against you. And they all came up short. They never stood a chance." The words landed like a bomb on the raw, exposed nerves of Alara's heart. They healed wounds she didn't even know were still bleeding. All those nights she had listened, her heart breaking, had not been for nothing. Clara had seen it, felt it, even if she hadn't understood it. "So, what do we do now?" Alara asked, the question hanging between them, full of hope and trepidation. Clara took Alara's hand, lacing their fingers together. The fit was perfect. Natural. "I have no idea," she admitted with a small, watery smile. "But maybe we could figure it out? Together? We could try this. Whatever this is. We can take it one day at a time." Alara looked at their joined hands, then back up at Clara's hopeful, frightened, beautiful face. The ache in her chest was gone. In its place was a feeling so vast and bright she didn't have a name for it. It was more than love. It was recognition. It was home. "Okay," Alara said, her voice steady and sure for the first time in a very long time. "Let's try." 3 weeks later, the morning light streamed into the kitchen, painting stripes across the wooden floor. The air smelled of freshly ground coffee and something else, a deep, settled peace. Alara stood at the counter, watching as Clara, wearing one of Alara's old, soft t-shirts, expertly frothed milk for their lattes. The change had been both seismic and surprisingly simple. The first few days were a dance of shy glances and hesitant touches, of rediscovering each other in this new context. They talked for hours, recontextualizing their entire history, finding new meaning in old memories. The ghost of Mark had been respectfully exorcised, a footnote in a chapter that was now closed. Their friends had been a mix of shocked and overwhelmingly supportive, most of them claiming they'd seen it coming for years. They had fallen into a new rhythm, one that felt more natural than any before it. It was in the way Clara now instinctively reached for Alara's hand when they walked down the street. It was in the easy, casual kisses goodbye in the morning and hello in the evening. It was in the quiet comfort of reading side by side in bed, their legs tangled together. The terror had not vanished entirely, but it had softened, transforming into a shared, gentle awe at what they were building. Clara turned from the coffee machine, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. She paused, a small, soft smile playing on her lips as she looked at Alara. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Alara smiled back, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. "I was just thinking about your black dress." Clara's smile widened. She set the mugs down and walked over to Alara, wrapping her arms around her waist and pulling her close. "Ah, yes. The dress that nearly gave us both a heart attack." She rested her chin on Alara's shoulder, her voice becoming a warm murmur against her ear. "Best decision I ever made, being too lazy to zip up my own dress." Alara laughed, a light, happy sound that filled the sunlit kitchen. She leaned into the embrace, feeling the steady beat of Clara's heart against her back. The old, familiar ache was a distant memory, a scar from a battle she had, against all odds, won. She understood now that the years of pining had not been a waste. They had been a foundation. They had built the home she was standing in right now, a home made not of bricks and mortar, but of shared history, profound understanding, and a brave, terrifying, beautiful love. "I'm exactly where I need to be," Clara whispered, as if reading her mind. Alara turned in her arms, her hands coming to rest on Clara's waist. She looked into the eyes of the woman she had loved in silence for so long and saw her own love reflected back, bright and clear and true. Then we're both exactly where we need to be.